All right, so we looked at particle system 2 and we actually made some smoke with that, but we're going to look at a different particle system now that'll actually allow you to map layer art to your particles. So you can actually use your own artwork as a particle. Fit this. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to make a new composition. That way you can keep your animation from your previous composition. So go to Composition, New Composition. We'll call this one Particles 2. Use the same settings, your HD 720 settings, and about 5 seconds in your duration, and click OK. This time we're going to make a new solid layer, just like we did before, but this time make it a white solid. And this will make sense when we actually do the layer mapping in a second. Then you're going to go to your Effect menu, Simulation, and then Particle World will be right below the one we just used, Particle System 2. So we want to choose CC Particle World. It's very similar to the previous particle effect. Pretty much all the options are the same with a few extra options. So the extra options that we want to kind of look at with this video are the ability to use your own artwork as a particle, the ability to use this grid right here as a floor to either bounce or stick or slide off your particles. And also, this is a bit of a 3D particle system. It's not real 3D, but it'll respond to basic camera movements. So first things first, let's go ahead and set up our particles. So I'm going to switch back to my project panel, and I took my cowboy illustration from our walk lesson. I'm going to use that. But feel free to use your own artwork if you like. I'm using this one specifically because it's contained within a composition. And I wanted to highlight the fact that you can actually use a whole pre-composition as your particle. So you can actually build a little animated particle if you want. So let's say you want to have something like a coin shooting out and you actually want to have the coin spin within the composition. You have the ability to do that sort of thing. Or if you wanted fire and you want to have an animated fire within the composition, you don't have to have static fire as a particle. You can have animated particles. So once you bring your artwork in to your layers, go ahead and hide it. We don't need it to be visible in order to use it as a layer map. Select my white solid again, go back to my effect controls, and we want to go into the particle section to assign this. So I'm going to choose, for my particle type, I want to choose textured square. So any of the textured will actually pull in your artwork, but the textured square actually gives you the closest to looking like your artwork. The other ones tend to crop it a little bit weird. So I'm going to choose textured square. You're not going to see anything happen at first. We actually need to set our texture. That's going to be right below here, texture section. And for the texture layer, you're going to choose the layer that you want to use as your artwork. Mine was inside of a pre-composition, so it's a little bit small, so I'm going to increase my birth and death size a bit so they show up a bit better. But we can see now I've got my cowboy as my particle layer. Let me also lower my birth rate. Since this is artwork and not very simple particles, we don't need to have as many of them on the screen. So you can see that they're taking on this kind of yellow and red tint like any of our particles would. But that's not really what we want. We want to have the actual artwork color in here. And this is why I had you set the solid to be white. So we can go into our color map and change it to origin constant, and that way we actually get the color of our layers in here. You can also set your max opacity up if you want to keep the opacity in there. And the opacity map is going to be done a little bit different. You can actually set kind of key points on how the opacity is going to work. But what I want is I just want it to be all the way up the whole time. So I'm going to drag this all up here. So if you just kind of click and drag it along the top, that'll do it. If you pull it down, that'll create fade outs. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but all the way filled in is constant color. Okay. So my particles are all set up, and if we preview it, we can see I've got multiple cowboys shooting out from my emitter. Now let's look at how to work with this floor a little bit. So I'm going to collapse my particle system, go into my physics section, and we can see our basic physics that we've seen in other ones. There's actually a couple extra animations that you might want to try out. But the main thing that we want to look at here is our floor. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my floor. And we have the ability to change the position of the floor. It's only one dimensional. It either goes up or down. You can't move it side to side. The floor just kind of extends forever and left and right. But if you wanted to raise it a little bit so you can bounce it off a higher object, you can do that. And then for my floor action, we have ice, which will have the particles hit and kind of slide off. We have glue, which will have the particles hit and stick, which would be really great if you want to like shoot arrows out or something like that. And then bounce is also very useful. It allows you to bounce your particles off the floor. And you can change how bouncy it is, how random the bounces are, and how much they spread out when they bounce through these dials down here. Okay, so the last thing that I want to highlight is the ability to respond to some basic 3D camera movements. And you can't do anything too fancy with it. You can't like revolve around it and expect it to like revolve around your particles and have it look like this great revolving animation. But you can, if you're doing like a parallax movement, you can have it respond to that parallax movement. So the position of the camera will affect the way the particles look. So let's go ahead and try that out. We'll go ahead and make a new camera layer. Just keep it at one node, it's fine. Since we've only got one camera, camera 1 is fine for the name. Click OK. You'll see them adjust a little bit right at the start. But if you go into your position property, let's move to 1 second where we actually see the particles. You can reposition your camera so that it kind of moves along the particles a little bit. Usually I would use a 2-view layout for this and move it in orthographic space, but since we're only going to be moving on one dimension, I think it's okay to actually just kind of adjust our properties if we want. So we'll do one to the left and one to the right, and we'll see that the particles are actually responding to the camera movement. So we got a lot of things going on with this. We have our own custom particles in here. We have a floor that's bouncing our particles off, and we have camera movement in here too. So this is a much more complicated particle system, but the nice thing is if you've gotten used to the way that the particle system 2 worked, there's not a lot of difference in here, and it's just the new features that you have to get used to.